Hi, everyone. I'm so excited that behavior is getting such recognition at this conference. As everyone has said so far this morning, it's really important for us to be attending to the welfare, the behavioral health of the animals, because it contributes to their overall welfare and also enhances their their physical health and contributes to their adoptability. So this morning, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about rehabilitation and training efforts that can be done in the shelter, and then share with you a little bit about what we're doing. As you, I'm sure, are aware, behavior problems are a very significant reason why animals end up in shelters. And for dogs, numerous studies have indicated that it is the #1 reason why people bring their dogs or abandon their dogs. So you already heard a little bit about me, so I can skip over this stuff real quick. This is the team that I work with, and as was mentioned, I actually don't work in a traditional shelter anymore. I used to, but now we work primarily on cruelty case animals and disaster response. And we work very closely with our field investigations and response team at the ASPCA, and they investigate cruelty cases. We seize and shelter the animals in emergency shelters, and we also support the prosecution of the people who have been arrested. This is my environment, emergency shelter. Typically, we are holding animals in protective custody for as long as 3 to 6 months in some cases, and most often it's in some kind of warehouse situation where we've set up housing for the animals. And over the last couple of years, as the ASPCA has become more involved in these kinds of cases, the behavior program has become a vital, integral component of the care of these animals. So we always have at least one behavior expert on the ground at all times at these shelters. And certainly the feeling amongst most of the ASPCA folks and also the people who work with us in these shelters is that these animals have been the victim of abuse and neglect, and we want to save as many as we possibly can. So my team does a lot of different aspects of work, but what I'm going to focus on for this talk is the socialization and rehabilitation work that we do with the animals in these emergency shelters, because my thinking is if we can accomplish a significant amount in an emergency shelter situation, which is a very impoverished situation, just think of what you can do in a more traditional shelter. So with our efforts for socialization, rehabilitation, we're looking at improving identified behavior concerns in the animals and then warding off any kind of behavioral deterioration and overall enhancing their welfare. We evaluate all the animals that come through these cases and end up in our sheltering system, and the evaluation feeds directly into what we do with the animals. And I admit I'm going to be very dog-centric in this talk because most of our cases do involve dogs. So it's hard for you to see what's up on the screen, but basically this is the final page of our evaluation software. And once we've evaluated the dog, then we can, does this have a pointer thing on it? The red button? Aha, thank you. So we can click off right away what kind of signs we're going to put on the animal's cage, if it's a timid dog or a scared dog, or if it doesn't walk well on leash. We can identify those things right away. And then we have very simple protocols in most cases that we can check off, and the animals start to get that attention right away as soon as we get these done. And most of the interventions that we're talking about doing are very simple procedures that even the daily care staff can do, and they want to do. They want to be involved in this work. this just shows you the rest of the page because it didn't all fit on the same page. And we do have more complicated procedures for the dogs that have more significant behavior problems. And then we have various levels of volunteers and staff who are able to do these different procedures. But it's all part of the basic orientation that they go through when they come to work at the shelter. We do have to prioritize, obviously. Not all the dogs can get all these different procedures. Not all of them need it, but not all of them can get it because typically we're talking about housing 200 to 300 animals at a time, and so we do have to prioritize, hence the different levels and then, of course, different types of procedures. So, for example, a dog that is high energy, or maybe a young dog that's showing some tendency to grab his leash, we might check off the tug with rules so that the dog learns to play tug properly. A dog that's a little bit shy, we check off hand targeting so he can learn to approach people's hands, handling procedures, and then play groups, which is a big part of our enrichment program. Training as enrichment has so many benefits. It provides mental stimulation, obviously, for the dogs. It allows them some control over their environment, which is a big factor when it comes to minimizing stress and contributing to welfare. And then in the end, improving physical health as well, but also training, just basic manners training can obviously enhance the adoptability of the animals. There's been at least one study that put some dogs on a training program and some dogs did not, and the dogs that had gone through the training program were 1.5 times more likely to be adopted than the dogs that weren't. Adopters prefer animals that approach the front of the cage when they visit. They prefer dogs that don't bark. They prefer dogs that sit. So clearly, dogs that are anticipating being trained are going to approach when people come, and sit is probably the most basic thing you're going to be teaching them. So it also makes daily care of the animals much easier because when they start to learn basic manners, you of course can move the animals more efficiently. So when it comes to the procedures that we do in the emergency shelter, we do have people rotating in and out all the time. We don't have the same staff all the time. So not only do we include training on how to do these procedures in the orientation that they receive, but we also have a lot of visuals around the shelter as well, reminding people what they should be doing, what they should be asking the dogs to do, and the steps that they can go through to do it. And we also have a little whiteboard on every dog's cage so we can indicate what level the dogs are at in terms of their basic training. So this is all, very much part of the staff training. And so this is just an example of a poster that we would have for getting the dogs to learn to not jump up and keep all 4 feet on the floor. We try to make it as easy for the staff to do as possible. So we work closely with the medical team and reassure them that the dogs are going to get adequate nutrition. And we do that by having a bucket outside of each dog's pen. And rather than them getting their food just in a bowl, all their kibble goes into that bucket along with some treats. And so it's incredibly easy for the staff to just grab a couple of pieces of kibble, maybe a treat in there as well, so the dog gets 1 or 2 high-value pieces of food, and they can do 3 or 4 reps of just a simple sit exercise. And this dog is showing that he's learning to wait while the gate is being opened. As I mentioned, we do hand targeting. Some dogs, in particular the shy dogs, we focus on that kind of work, but again, it also encourages the dogs to come to the front of the cage right away. And dogs that need more manners, we probably would work on a down as well. So these are very, very simple behaviors. Hifi seems to be particularly popular. It's absolutely non-functional, of course, but one of the things we have found when we do get custody of these animals, we very rarely adopt them out directly ourselves. We work with a network of partner shelters, and they will take the animals from us. And the more tricks these dogs have on them, like roll over and high five and hand targeting, the more popular they are amongst the shelters. So those dogs are the ones that get claimed first in terms of when we start sending them out. So even though it's very, very simple, it makes a huge difference. Oops, went too far. Puppies, kittens, they require additional work, additional attention, because they are growing up in a shelter situation. Again, we've heard over and over with young puppies and kittens, it's of course better to get them out into a foster situation or get them adopted as quickly as possible. But again, these are animals that don't belong to us yet, so they're in protective custody. So oftentimes these animals will grow up in the emergency shelters. So we make sure that they get socialization on a daily basis, they get handling. And also, particularly with puppies, we have to work on mouthing, because it seems like a lot of the puppies end up in, well, they did end up in bite quarantine because of simple mouthing problems. So we've been able to eliminate that problem just by doing simple procedures to work on the mouthing with the puppies. I just realized I cannot see. You're going to wave something at me when you, okay. Yeah, good. So rehabilitation, obviously that's taking things one step further and looking at what can we do to improve any behavior concerns that the animals might have. And shelters are obviously going to vary in their resources and how much they can devote to this type of situation. But again, in the emergency shelters, we're talking about very limited staff, very limited facilities, but we're still able to intervene and help the animals that have behavior concerns. Again, there are simple protocols that we encourage all the staff to engage in. This is an example of a couple of the protocols that we would have posted around the shelter. Quick and dirty handling is just what it sounds like. Every dog is going to have to get out of his cage a couple times a day at least. And if they're small dogs, they're going to get picked up. If they're larger dogs, they're going to get put on a leash. So what better thing to do than teach them that when people touch them or people reach for them, that it's a good thing. And all that takes is a couple of treats or a leftover hamburger, cheeseburger. That's even better, but the medical staff aren't so keen on that. I'm known as the breakfast person because we always stay in a hotel that has full breakfast in the morning, and I don't eat breakfast, but I go there and pile up the plate with sausages and bacon and take it to the shelter, and then I get in trouble. But it works. Drive-by treats is another simple procedure. Again, if you're dealing particularly with animals that are stressed, fearful in the shelter, not well socialized with people, just simply approaching and giving the dogs treats teaches them that when people come by, good things happen. So we have these simple procedures that help every single animal. All of them are going to benefit from these kinds of things. Communication is obviously vital when you're talking about behavior, because you need to know which dogs need what and at what level they're at. So it can be as simple as just having a common area where people can look and see which dogs. So for instance, there's a sheet that says which dogs are scared. They need extra socialization. We have I'm going nuts page, so the dogs that need extra physical exercise. We identify which dogs are good with other dogs, so they would be good helper dogs for play sessions, and then daily enrichment procedures as well, so that we don't end up doing the same thing with the dogs every day. So I was going to share with you just briefly a case that we did a couple of years ago, which was a puppy mill case where we had, I think it was about 200 dogs no, about 100 dogs, I guess it was. And this particular case was the first time we had dogs in an emergency shelter for a lengthy period of time. And so what we did is we evaluated the dogs at the very beginning when they first came in, after they'd acclimated to the shelter, and then we evaluated them again 6 weeks later, and then we evaluated them again 6 weeks after that. And typically, you know, we're going to expect that animals held long-term in a shelter, particularly an emergency shelter, they're going to deteriorate behaviorally. They're going to start going crazy. But you know, we had our standard enrichment program and we had our behavior program in place, and we were very pleased to see that with each subsequent evaluation, the dogs improved their behavior scores. So I'll just briefly mention that we categorize the dogs according to an ABC classification system. So dogs that score an A on the evaluation are dogs that don't have any behavior concerns at all. They're adoptable as is. B dogs are ones that might have some restrictions on placement, or they might have mild problems, like they're timid dogs, so they're going to take a little bit of time to acclimate to the situation, or they don't appear to be good with children, so they should go to a home without children, or maybe they're not very tolerant of other dogs, so they should go to a single dog household. So those would be B dogs. And then the C dogs are dogs that have more significant behavior problems. And as you can see from the graph, is that the percentage of the number of dogs that improved to an A classification was quite dramatic across these 2 periods of time. And this shows the dogs that improved. So all the dogs, this green section indicates dogs that improved their overall score on the evaluation. The yellow dogs are dogs that stayed the same, and essentially we had no dogs that got worse. Now, this is not a controlled study. I need to emphasize that because we had no control group. There could be many reasons why these dogs improved, but the point is they did improve. They did not get worse. And again, using very, very simple interventions that were possible in this kind of situation. So this next video shows you just a couple of examples of dogs between their first evaluation and their second. We have to be very flexible in where we do our behavior evaluations as well. At this particular point in time at the shelter, we ended up doing them in a trailer, a transport trailer. This is obviously not the whole evaluation, it's just a segment of it. But this is now the dog's second evaluation.
Good activity. You want to play with this, Miss Chippy? Oh my. That's adorable. You're really cute. It's like a dog food commercial. I know. You got them all barking. Come on, let's go. Yeah. Look at the little doggy. Oh, she's so cute! Hi, doggy, doggy!
By the time of the second evaluation, they built us a little area in the building. So as you can see, we pretty much usually end up in a penned area with a tarp around it to minimize visual distraction, but it's still very noisy. So pretty dramatic differences in those dogs between the two evaluations. So we took this to the ASPCA board and said, hey, you know, if we can do this in an emergency shelter, just imagine what we could do if we had a dedicated facility. Earlier this year, we opened the ASPCA Behaviour Rehabilitation Centre. We're linked with a shelter in New Jersey called St. Hubert's Animal Welfare Center. And while it is designed as a regular shelter, we have a separate area of the shelter that's specifically devoted to working with dogs that need behavior rehab. And because we're trying to demonstrate the effectiveness of the procedures that we're using, we're very focused right now on a specific population of dogs, and those are dogs from cruelty cases, pretty specifically puppy mills and hoarding cases where the dogs are showing extreme fear and have not been socialized with people. And so that way we're able to standardize the treatments that we're using to a moderate degree and look at the same type of problem and the same type of treatments. That's the staff. We are spoiled in terms of what we have there. We do have 2 outdoor play areas where we can work on socializing the dogs and interacting with the dogs and exercising the dogs. We have a couple of real life rooms. They're deceivingly small compared to what this looks like in the picture. They're very small, but they're still rooms that are quiet. We give all the dogs daily enrichment, a variety of different types of activities, whether they are undergoing treatment at the time or not. We do have half the dogs on a time delay, so they come in and they wait 2 weeks before treatment, so they get evaluated right away. They get evaluated at the end of 2 weeks, and then they go into treatment. Other dogs get evaluated and they go into treatment right away. So we're able to have a control group that way in terms of demonstrating the effectiveness of the treatment. But even the dogs in the 2-week time lag get enrichment every day. And then we have our treatment plans, and basically at this point we are using very much a shotgun approach. We are doing a lot of everything and hoping that we can be effective with the vast majority of these dogs. These are the kinds of problems that we end up seeing in the dogs we bring into the center. That's unfortunate. You have just enough room to be in the little hole. Help. Wow. Dr. Miller mentioned the feigned sleep. We have a number of dogs
exactly what Ashley was doing during her medical intake.
that do this.
Exactly this. In fact, so much so that eventually she was going like this on my hand, and she had a leash muzzle on, just completely like. Yeah. So, oh, she can do things. Isn't she? Oh, cool. Can you see her on my knee?
I can see her in the video.
Yeah.
I see her.
She's awfully cute. Yeah, I can see she's just. It is like she's out for a bit. She has to go in.
Yes, he is.
Moderately fearful or mildly?
I think moderately.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Red flag or alert?
Alert.
So the population we're dealing with, as you can see, is pretty consistent in terms of they're very much afraid of people. They are not comfortable being handled. They're afraid in any novel situation. And most of them have no experience with any kind of restraint or wearing a collar or leash. those sorts of things. So we do have treatment programs that focus on each one of these aspects, and I don't expect you to read this, but it's basically protocols that for the most part go in terms of increasing level of difficulty, and we do a lot of desensitization and counter conditioning, very, very interactive at first in terms of just presence of people. We do a lot of helper dog playgroup kinds of activities, and then some training such as hand targeting, and then progressively moving to more challenging aspects. So we have the same kind of thing for fear of handling, and of course some of this is going to overlap in that we're doing the same exercises for the different aspects. I'm going to skip this in the interest of time because you're going to see some of it anyway. Fear of novelty, so we introduce them to different sounds, different scents, different experiences. Most of these dogs certainly have never seen anything like stairs before, so we build those kinds of things into it. And then once the dogs are ready, getting them off-site so that they can experience more normal aspects of community life. And again, leash walking, starting off with just getting them comfortable with you reaching towards them and then having the leash put on, and then can they move on the leash. And we do some back chaining because typically these dogs are more comfortable in their kennels, so we start with getting them to just take a few steps back to their kennel. And then again, doing work with helper dogs to focus on the social facilitation aspect. We're finding that the helper dogs are probably the most powerful component that we have to work with a lot of these dogs. So this next video will just show you the dramatic change that these dogs sometimes demonstrate when they are in the presence of other dogs.
Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. Come with you. Come with you. Come with you. Come with you.
We've been petitioning to be allowed to have helper dogs live at the shelter for short periods of time. So far, we've been overwhelmed with dogs that need us, so we haven't had the luxury of being able to do that, but we do have staff that have wonderfully well socialized dogs. So that you're going to see staff dogs in a couple minutes.
Okay.
That's a very interesting contrast.
Yep. I know. Hi.
We do end up adopting a lot of these dogs out to homes with other dogs, simply because they are so much more confident with another dog.
I know, it's you. I know. Hi.
We're also finding the value of office fostering, not that we didn't know it before, but some of these dogs are not improving significantly living in the kennel environment at all, even though they're getting out for their treatment sessions. And so occasionally we've had dogs that we end up moving into the office So this is an example of one dog that after a couple of weeks of treatment, she hadn't really shown any improvement. So this is during her first evaluation, or her evaluation after she'd been in treatment for a couple of weeks.
The noise and the open mouth thing is certainly just relax.
So now what we've done is we've moved her so that she's living 24/7 in the office. So she's surrounded by people and other dogs pretty much all the time during the day.
Hey.
And this is after a week or so of living in the office.
Hey, Mama. Hi.
She's still dragging her line
girl.
because she still doesn't like being reached for,
The
but
line. Hi. How's it going? Hello. Hi. Hello. Hi. Hello. Come here. Hi, dude. Hello. Hello. Hi. 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 Hello. Hello. Hi. Hi. Boo. Oh, Boo, come. Oh, Boo, come. Here you go. Oh, Boo. Oh. Hi.
so vastly improved quality of life already for this dog. In the interest of time, I am going to move on to the next video, which kind of shows you a beginning to end process for one of the dogs.
This is Lily. The upcoming clips show the end results of her treatment at the rehab center. When she came to us, she was not behaviorally prepared for adoption. I'll read the comments from her behavior evaluation, which you see there. Lily was difficult to remove from her cage due to defensive aggression. She flattened, tried to hide, and would not walk on leash. She was extremely fearful throughout the evaluation, immobile and trembling. She will require extensive behavior modification and environmental management to give her a decent quality of life. So first, we got to know Lily in her kennel run where she felt safest, and that's her last evaluation. As you can see, she was happy to see us there. Then we got her out into the world and she learned to walk on leash, at first with a helper dog and then all by herself. Then she learned that novel objects weren't scary, like this vacuum. And she also learned to do new things like climb stairs. That's her during training. And the next clip shows her during her behavior evaluation. That's her final evaluation. Lily even learned to jump into the car and ride in a crate. So over weeks of treatment, Lily got to know us very, very well. That's her with one of her trainers. And she became very affectionate with us and comfortable with us. But in order to become adoptable, she needed to be comfortable with unfamiliar people as well. So we introduced her to many, many of them, at first with other dogs, because she felt most comfortable that way. And then she learned to meet people all by herself. And you'll note they always come with food. She learned that people predict good things. And eventually she decided she loved meeting people. This clip shows her meeting a man wearing a hat she's never seen before, which is very impressive, and she shows no signs of fear. One of her biggest challenges was handling, and she's showing you gimme 5 right there. She was very sensitive about paw touching and also other parts of her body touching. So Lauren is showing you a very unique type of targeting. Lily is voluntarily placing her neck and also her back end on Lauren's hand on cue. And then you can see Lauren slowly work her hand down Lily's foot. So this exercise helped her get used to touching with familiar people. And here you can see she finally learned that touching was actually very nice. The final and most challenging step was to convince her that it was okay when unfamiliar people touched her as well. So we did hand targeting with unfamiliar people, as you see here, and also give me 5 to get her used to paw touching by unfamiliar people. And this last clip shows her voluntarily placing her neck against that new person's hand. That was a very big victory for her. So we are happy to report that during her final evaluation, Lily was reclassified as an A dog. Originally, she was a D dog, severe behavior concerns. In fact, all 3 of the other dogs from the CIA case, originally C dogs, became A dogs as well. Here they are up for adoption at St. Hubert's. Thanks to the combined efforts of the CIA and Rehab Center teams, these 4 dogs got a second chance at happiness. 3 have already gone home. We look forward to many more success stories like theirs over the next 2 years, and we look forward to indirectly helping countless other victims of animal cruelty and neglect as we share our groundbreaking research with animal welfare organizations across the country.
So that gives you kind of a glimpse into the kind of work that we're doing with this specific population of dogs. Now, clearly, that's not feasible for every shelter. It's not going to have those kinds of resources. But as I mentioned, there's a lot that you can do even in very, very limited situations. The other type of problem that more and more shelters are looking at dealing with now is resource guarding. So possessiveness over food and over chewies and other items. And the video that I'm going to show you was shared with me by Lindsay Wood of the Humane Society of Boulder County in Colorado. She, in particular, has been very focused on developing a simple protocol that can be used to help these dogs. And so this video shows you an example of one of the dogs they worked with. And again, she's using basic desensitization and counter conditioning. This is the initial evaluation for the dog. And the unfortunate thing is that this type of problem is something that is very reliably elicited in behavior evaluations. So it has become a behavior problem that a lot of shelters euthanize for, but it's also one of the most treatable problems that we see in the shelters. So as I said, it's basic desensitization and counter conditioning. The bowl is empty, and so the person is approaching with really tasty things. And all they're looking for in terms of an indication to move forward is that tail wag, that anticipation response. Is the dog looking up and excited to see the person approaching? So they progress to having kibble in the bowl and more interesting food that they're bringing to the dog. So the dog is learning that when people approach, they get something better than they already have. Programs vary in terms of whether or not they actually include the ASPCA hand as part of the treatment. Lindsay does, in part for safety reasons, but also because they do a reevaluation at the end of this, where they put the dog through the whole evaluation again. And so they do want to include the ASPCA hand in case that's part of the dog's reaction. When we used to do this kind of work at our New York City shelter, we didn't actually use the ASPCA hand. We used our own hands during the during the treatment phase. So they've had tremendous success in adopting out these dogs that show resource guarding on the behavior evaluation. One thing I would be remiss if I didn't say is that there's a new research paper that's just been, I'm not sure if it's published yet or it's online as a preprint, but Dr. Amy Marder at the Animal Rescue League in Boston did a study where they looked at dogs that had gone through the behavior evaluation and compared the dogs that showed aggressiveness over or guarding over food and those that didn't, and they did not do any treatment. They still adopted those dogs out, and then they did follow up on with the adopters post-adoption, and found that about half of the dogs that showed resource guarding on the evaluation showed it in the home, and half of them didn't. So it was really a 50-50 kind of thing. And about 20% of the dogs that hadn't shown it on the evaluation were reported to show it in the home. So even though we like to think that this behavior evaluation is useful information, to some degree it's certainly not a really precise tool. Probably the most important take-home message from Amy's study, though, is that none of the owners considered the dogs guarding a significant problem. They were quite willing to live with the dog and manage that situation rather than return the dog. So again, it's just further evidence that euthanizing dogs for this particular behavior is not necessarily what we need to be doing. We need to be either teaching people how to manage the situation and educating people, and or doing just simple procedures to affect it in the shelter. How much time do I have? Am I done? Okay, I'm going to skip the last section, which was a little bit about fighting dogs, but I can share that on another talk. So thank you very much for your attention.